Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast, a weekly podcast whose mission is multifaceted. Each week when you tune in, you will find episodes that question best practices, challenge music education dogma, facilitate conversations about touchy topics, demonstrate pedagogies, and conversations where colleagues learn from each other. Okay, this week I'm doing a relatively short episode with you simply to spread some awareness about some things that I'm trying to do with the show, and for people who enjoy the show and listen and on a regular basis, and you're people who tune in here fairly often, I want your input and I want your feedback, because we're entering another year soon into 2026, which would be now the 7th calendar year of Choralosophy Podcast. And as always, I am searching and digging and pulling out conversations even from people who don't really want to have conversations sometimes because they're nervous about the limelight and the spotlight, to present those conversations to you. But I also need topic ideas. I always do. So over at choralosophy.com, there is a form that you can fill out on the main page that allows you to submit show ideas. Now, you could be the show idea. You could have a burning topic that you really want to discuss with me and share with the choral world out here on the podcast, but it also could be that you don't want to appear on the show. You just want me to talk about a certain thing and or find a guest who is an expert on that thing, because as I talk about all the time, I'm not the expert on everything. I feel comfortable on claiming expertise in certain areas of what we do because I've done the work to justify that, but I am not the area expert in all the things that we teach. So one of those examples I know I am actively looking for, and I've had some good suggestions, but I'm looking for some experts in a variety of areas that we can do shows on. Your music program or event deserves a platform that does it all, without the extra costs. With Ludus, you get seamless ticketing, built-in marketing, powerful fundraising, and volunteer management, where volunteers can sign up, schedule shifts, and track hours with ease. Need to sell merchandise and concessions in person? Ludus Retail lets you log sales by each group, track inventory, keep everything organized. Hosting music lessons or theater camps? They have a classes feature, which makes registration and student tracking effortless. And it's free for your organization. Thousands of programs already trust Ludus because they help you focus on what matters most, the performance. If you haven't already, I really think it's time for you to ditch the bulky sight reading books, the paper, all of the things that are already in the kids' folders in your classroom, because it's not customizable to what they need in the moment. Sight Reading Factory allows this and so much more, including auto-assessment for at-home assignments, no more grading them individually. They can be graded in the moment. So use the Choralosophy checkout code, Choralosophy. When you check out, it'll give you a 10% discount every time you get a membership for yourself and for all of your students, which is really, really important so they can do this at home. I'm not sure how much, if anything, out there has not gone up in price since 2020, but I know one thing that hasn't, and that is the membership to the Patreon and to the Substack to support this show. The people who are signed up over there as paid subscribers, as my thank you to them, they can get things like t-shirts from the choralosophy.com shop. They can also get access to my Google folder of teaching materials that I've talked about on the show for over the years. And of course, they just want to help make sure that this show can continue. And one of those benefits is a shout out on the show. Shout outs for the Inner Circle and producer tiers over on Patreon. We have Brian Long, Chandler Smith, Venture Studios, David Kowalczyk, Kyle Peterson, Max Jackson, Michael Herron, Rebecca Chalk, and Stephen Kathy Kakachik. The aging voice would be one. I think we still need more episodes on the adolescent female changing voice, because that's a under-researched topic. We've had Bridget Sweet. There are more experts, though, that I would like to talk to. I think there still needs to be more in-depth conversations, just for variety's sake, on vocal pedagogy in general, the ways that we can communicate to our students the best healthy ways to sing that they can take, independent of style, that they can take out of our class and apply it to the other things that they choose to do in their singing life. Other things that I would be interested in hearing from you in that form of what types of topics should I be covering. Some popular requests I want to talk about real quick, because I do get a lot of requests for different topics. One of them is wanting to talk to people who teach in very small schools, small rural schools, about how they create meaningful ensemble music experiences for their kids when there aren't very many kids to choose from, and when there aren't many kids even to recruit. But of course, I can't really speak to that at all, because I've only taught in 5A high schools around Kansas City, with 2,000 kids-ish in the building. And so I do not know what that's like. I would be happy, though, to host a panel of some kind. So if you are involved in a school that is, or have lots of experience in a school like that, I would love to hear from you, and maybe we could set up like a panel discussion about the strategies and the things that might work for you in those smaller schools that maybe wouldn't work for me, or vice versa. Maybe there's things that work for me that would not work for you, but then I bet you there's also a lot of common ground. Like, what are some of the shared concepts and principles that would work no matter how many kids are in the room, if it's a choir of 3 or a choir of 300. So this would be, I think, would be a really, really great topic. Another topic that's been brought up recently over in the Choirolophers Facebook page that I want to float here and just see if it stimulates any ideas from you guys is the idea of doing an episode or episodes about all the other things that we'd have to do in our jobs that are not choir, because there's so many music educators that listen to the show. Of course, the show audience has some crossover with non-teachers who are choral music people, and so maybe that type of a show would exclude those people, but you also might still find it interesting. And so I most of the time have stayed within the choral realm. But for example, I teach music appreciation. I'm only 3 years into doing that. I've got 23 years of experience of teaching choir, but only 3 years of teaching music appreciation. And honestly, I think I'm terrible at it. I'm getting better each year. I'm a little bit more intentional and more prepared for that class, but I very much feel like a young teacher cutting my teeth in that. And I'm sure there's other people who teach choir, but they also teach theater, but maybe they're not trained in that. Or there's the choir teacher who also teaches an instrumental class, but maybe they're not trained in that, or vice versa, right? Lots of instrumental teachers that are teaching choir. So an episode, I think that might also be because of the variety. There's no way I could cover all the different permutations of that. That also could be a cool panel episode. So if this is stimulating any of your thoughts, thinking about maybe being willing to be a panelist. Also, you can use that form on the main page of choirolosophy.com where you can submit your idea. So there's different ways you can do that there, including to stay anonymous or not. So don't be afraid to make contact. I always find it so funny to find out from someone, just in general, oh my goodness, I've been listening to your show for years, but yet I have never met you and I have never had a conversation with you. And it's easy, because of the way social media works, for me to assume that the people who interact with me regularly on social media are the only ones that are listening. But then, of course, I see the metrics, and I pay for high quality tracking of data for this podcast, and I know that it's way more than that that are out there listening and never comment and never reach out with an email and never say anything. They just listen, and that's fine. To be clear, you are allowed to just lurk. And of course, there's hate listeners. There's people who really, really hate everything that I'm doing and don't want it to continue to happen. That exists too. And there's people who love it, but just don't want to admit in public that they love it. That's a part of it too. But then there's also the type of person who's just it's not their comfort zone. They just like to listen. They don't want to be bothered with any type of a back and forth with me, and that's fine too, because I don't have time for all of it. But the best ways to do that, of course, is to send an email to choirolosophy@gmail.com if you have a comment about something you've heard, to fill out the form on choirolosophy.com if you just want to suggest an episode. And of course, I do like to see people pop up on Facebook, because honestly, that's how you all in the audience help me make sure that this show continues. There's lots of ways, of course. There's the promo codes for all the products, and there's the liking and sharing and leaving ratings on things. But honestly, and I hate that this is true, especially how much criticism of social media I've done in the last year. I hate that it's true, but without Facebook, I don't have a show or a business. So it is very, very helpful when you simply join the conversation. And I do think in general, as a profession, we are allowing the bullies on social media to win too much. I've seen way, way more anonymous posting lately in choir groups. That worries me. And it's not, and I made a post about this actually on Facebook, but I want to talk about it a little bit here too. It's not that I think that it's bad inherently to post anonymously in a Facebook group. I totally understand all kinds of good reasons to do that. You've got an opinion you don't want to be judged for, but also maybe you're worried that a parent might see a question about something sensitive that you're seeking advice from other teachers on, or you don't want an administrator to see that question because you're afraid that they'll think it's a boundary that you're crossing, or you just don't want backlash from something that you asked about online, or you're whistleblowing, or any of those types of things that happen, and those are legitimate reasons to post anonymously. But I see it going way beyond that. I see it going beyond just general, normal questions that nobody would probably be offended by, but people are afraid to be judged or attacked because they've seen a culture online. And honestly, I think some of it, they've seen what's happened to me. They've seen what happens to, not afraid to go out and just say what I think online, and look what happens, right? And nobody wants to have that happen to them. And so I think there's this increasing case of just more and more anonymous posting, and leaving aside all the legitimate reasons for doing that. I do think that increased rate of anonymous posting does signal a problem. And it's a problem that ties directly into the mission of this show from the very, very beginning, back in 2019, is that we are trying to be activists for better conversation among colleagues here. And I've even had people criticize my use of the term activist, because there's a policing, or like a boundary policing around what types of causes get to be considered activist, which I find hilarious. So what does it even mean to be a conversation activist or a better conversation activist? I feel like I've developed something that has gone from it being a slogan on a shirt, which you can get on the coralosophy.com shop. You can get the shirt, you can get the mug, right? But what does it actually mean? I actually don't think of it just as a slogan. I think of it as a calling, something that is very important to me. It is something that I believe is existential to the fate of humanity, much less the music education profession. I think that there has to be a mechanism that we have trained ourselves to do, that when we are talking about things that are important to the profession and somebody disagrees with us, there needs to be a mechanism to follow, a procedure to follow. And there needs to be some type of norm within the profession for what qualifies as good conversation. And so I can start by saying some things that are not good conversation. One would be you disagree with someone or find them to have the wrong opinion about something. So instead of talking to them about it or just deciding to ignore it and moving along your day, you decide to talk about them behind your back and undermine their career and undermine their reputation and make sure no one ever listens to them or talk to them again, because that's some petty bullcrap right there. So that's not a good conversation. It doesn't get anyone anywhere. And more importantly, I think the reason that kind of approach, which is very popular in academic circles, I think that is the default for a lot of teachers. They don't want the confrontation. And so when someone says or does something that they don't like, that is kind of the first instinct. And I think that's very troubling. And I've been seeing that since way before I started a podcast. It's one of the reasons that I started the podcast, is I saw people undermining each other, assuming bad intent of colleagues, calling them names in Facebook groups, which has gotten better recently, but I think that's mostly because of the anonymous posting. It's harder to call somebody a name if you don't know who they are. For example, it's harder to call a person a bigot if you don't know their identity, because those tend to be identity-based insults. And so I'm not saying that that's why it's better. I just think in general, people are less willing to engage in anything meaningful online. And so my goal, of course, when I try to recruit people off of the social media, and as I mentioned before, that's kind of where what my business model is. I'm going on to social media not because I want to have conversations on social media. I'm trying to recruit people over here to the show where the real conversation happens. And that real conversation has led to so many great relationships that I've developed over the years with colleagues through this show. Conversations that they've told me that wouldn't happen anywhere else. And they're so grateful that there's a platform to talk about these things. But on the flip side, I've also had so many colleagues tell me that I'm glad you're talking about those things because I can't talk about those things because I work in higher ed, or because I don't have a supportive principal, so I can't talk about those things. All of this stuff just, to me, signals a toxic environment within our profession that does indeed need, or it does indeed warrant activism for better colleague conversation, for us being better at assuming the good faith of our colleagues. And if we don't assume that about the other person, then we will probably make an assumption in the negative towards that person, because we'll assume that they're seeing everything we see and they still have the wrong opinion. And that's, of course, a terrible assumption to make. Nobody sees the world through your eyes but you. So that's what I mean by being a better conversation activist. We can't just hope it happens. We have to advocate for it. We have to be willing to call out bad conversation when we see it. And what I mean by bad conversation is, I described an example before. There's duplicitousness and talking behind people's back. But what about on social media? If we see somebody calling someone else a name without evidence, like calling them racist, for example, without evidence, calling them a bigot of any kind without evidence, that's bad conversation. Are you a director new to the profession? Or are you a seasoned director who is in a new place? One of my favorite tips for generating interest in the program and to instill buy-in is to plan a trip. There are so many options. You can go to Orlando, you can go to Ireland, or you can perform in a parade or a theme park. You can even take the stage at Carnegie Hall in New York. Wherever you end up, not only will your current crew look forward to the trip, but younger students will count the days until it's their turn to go. If you have no idea where to start, connect with Kaleidoscope Adventures at mykatrip.com. That's intended. That is a tactic that is intended to poison the well, so nobody's willing to have a conversation with that person anymore. And then magically, you don't have to contend with their opinion anymore. And so that's lazy, bad conversation, and it's just mean. So I think that's part of where I just get flabbergasted sometimes. Sometimes it's enough to just say, "Why are you being a jerk?" Like, what is the playground bully justification for calling people, your colleagues that are trying to do the same job as you are, names on the internet, instead of just engaging with them about the ways that they see their job and the ways that they see the art form that we all know and love, which is choral music, or that they see music education in this way, and you don't see it that way. But to me, I guess it's just hard for me to understand people who don't encounter that difference of opinion with anything other than curiosity. Because for me, I've got a healthy ego about my opinions. I think I've got some good opinions. And when somebody doesn't have the same opinion as me, my first reaction is actually, wow, I wonder how they got there, because I see it as so obvious. So my view is so obvious to me because I'm seeing it through my eyes, right? But I want to know what your eyes show. I want to know how is it that you disagree with me about this? Because I thought I'd covered all the bases, but I guess not. You see something else. So please tell me about it. One of my favorite conversation tips or concepts actually came from Contra KC was hired to do a worship service, actually, to be the music in a church service once. And it was not a church that I'd ever been to. And the pastor, I didn't know the pastor. I was just listening, waiting for us to get up and sing. And the pastor was talking about conflict resolution in our lives, and when we come across people who we don't like, or that we disagree with, or whatever. And he mentioned his tactic, which was profoundly moving to me, which is essentially to train yourself to pause and stop whenever somebody says something to you that you find completely disagreeable, unjustifiable, possibly like there is no way that it could possibly be the right opinion. And for you to train yourself out of simply responding with rebuke and instead saying something like, "That's interesting. I see it a different way. Can you tell me why you see it the way you do?" And just start by asking a question. You will reduce the person's defenses and you will allow a conversation to start. Where, in my experience, 9 times out of 10, when I do it that way, I mean, I really mean 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, it leads to something positive. And it doesn't necessarily mean it leads to that person and I agreeing. But it leads to an understanding that causes that a person's opinion that I thought was horrible to be less horrible, because I understood where it was coming from, even if I didn't agree with it. And that's what I believe that choral music and ensemble music in general in our classes, but I believe that that's something that we offer our students that no other class does, which is not just a metaphor for that type of resolution. It's because you could do the metaphors too. You could do dissonance and resolution of harmonies, and how not all of our fighting sound waves can resolve into something beautiful. Like, all those metaphors are there, and I've heard all those metaphors. I've made those metaphors, but I mean literally. We offer that to students because in order to do what we do, we have to bring everybody into the room. We have to bring everybody into the room, regardless of how they feel about each other. And with teenagers, oh my goodness, it's constantly like drama outside of the classroom that comes into the classroom of who's fighting with who online, or who's saying what bad thing about the other one behind their back, or who broke up with who. That is something we are teaching these babies how to engage with that world, because even pre-social media, that world was already the world. And it's on steroids now, but it's still the world. What we do is we teach them how to encounter that dissonance and resolve it, and not in a way that makes everyone agree, but in a way that allows everyone to be at peace with everyone. And that, if that's not the goal, guys, I just don't even know what it is that we're even doing here. That has to be the goal. And so when I sell a t-shirt or a mug about being a better conversation activist, it is not unrelated to choral music. It is not unrelated to music education. In fact, it is central. It is the pillar of what it is that we do in music education. If you've got a beef with somebody, it can be resolved, but you have to want to. And in our classrooms, in our music education environments, we create an environment where they are incentivized to want to. They're incentivized to want to work out the issue because if they don't work out the issue with their friend, their ex-boyfriend, whatever it is, then they can't continue to make the music together. It just doesn't work. There's too much distraction. There's too many pulling rungs out of the ladder of Maslow's hierarchy, so to speak. So that's what it is. That's what we're doing here. And I want to continue to have these types of conversations with guests, with you all. Of course, there are some people who really only like the episodes that I do that are PD related, so teaching you how to teach something. And if I feel like I'm an expert on that, I will continue to do those things. So music literacy, certain things related to vocal ped that I've worked my butt off to understand. Doesn't mean I'm right about everything, but we've got awesome guests continuing and booking out into 2026 on all those topics. But I also want to know more about the different types of things that you need from the show, because that's you are who I am here to serve in terms of content. But since it's a weekly show, there will continue to be episodes that are just things that I think are interesting, which means that I might talk to somebody from other areas of the humanities or literature or an artist or an orchestral musician or any other type of person who does something adjacent but different from what we do. And I see parallels and I want to get inside their brain. We've had episodes in the past with neurosurgeons and neurologists and psychologists and writers for Newsweek and, COVID doctors, of course, if you go back far enough. That's what we are here. That's what this show is. You never know what you're going to get from week to week. So I hope that this was helpful. And of course, this is also the 1 week or the 1 year anniversary of a pretty orchestrated takedown of this show, which did not work. And it didn't work because you continued to listen. Now, I do think that we have more work to do related to problems like this, because again, it is related to this better conversation activism that I am engaged in. There are people who don't want better conversation because they want to be in charge of the conversation. And the call for guardrails and the call for, why does this person, Chris Munce, get to have this podcast where he just says whatever he wants and nobody gets to tell him what to say? Good. That's what we need more of. We don't need guardrails on people being able to think out loud. If there is something that is objectionable, be a grown-up and go talk to that person. That's all the guardrails that we need. That's all we ever had before social media. And I think the answer to the social media challenge and social dilemma in our society is that until we reestablish the norms that were there in conversation prior to social media, we need to establish those on social media. And that's always been my ethos. If I would say it to you on Facebook, I will say it to you in real life. And I think that makes people uncomfortable because we've developed new social norms on social media where we will say certain things on social media that we would never say to a person in person. I refuse to participate in that game. I'm not going to do it. If I would post it on Facebook, I would say it on the show. If I would say it on the show, I would say it to you in person. And I believe that is the answer. That is the answer for the example that we set for our students. It's the example for our profession, being able to continue to move forward. And so I'm going to continue to be an activist for that. And I need your help to do it, which means that you are signing up for the Patreon, you are using the promo code, but more importantly, you're going to that form on the website and you're giving me ideas so that I'm always have something to dig into, because of course everyone knows I'll talk about anything. So if it's something that I think is wide-reaching of a topic, then I want to know about it and I'll make an episode. Now, if you submit something and I decide not to make an episode out of it, I hope that doesn't hurt anyone's feelings. If it's too niche, I can't do it. It's got to be something that is broadly applicable to people. And if it's not super broadly applicable, I have to be able to think of a way to make it apply, because of course I need people to listen. That's the reality of this business. So I hope that you would be willing to help me with that by suggesting guests and by leaving ratings, sharing the episode, participating in the conversations. All of these things are crucial to fighting this battle with the people who don't want more conversation and the people who do. And I think if you're listening to this show on a semi-regular basis, you're in the wants more conversation camp. And I think that has to be something that we join together to do. And that's my call to action. On the way out, you're going to see a little bit of a reflection on this last year since the great cancellation gate of election week 2024. That's going to be available in its fullest form on the Patreon private podcast feed, which is available to Substack paid subscribers and Patreon paid subscribers only. Certain things I would say there that I won't say here. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this little mini episode, and we'll talk to you later. We have two guests recording this weekend. You're going to hear me talking to other people again very, very soon. Good morning, everyone, from my car. We're doing some car thoughts today because I have a rare day of peace in my car again. We are approaching the 1-year anniversary of an event that was very formative in my life and will probably always be one of the times that I look back on with the most bewilderment and frustration. And that is the time when a choral colleague with a lot of institutional power and respect made an attempt to ruin my life. And it failed, but the attempt was still there, which means that I'm not going to look back on that and feel very good about it, right? So this is what happened about a year ago, where, the attempt was made to basically make it so that I was not acceptable in polite society. The encouragement was spread far and wide for me to not be hired as a clinician, which up until that point, I had been getting a lot of gigs. I had just done my first all-state choir, or had been hired for my first all-state choir, which I then went ahead and did. But it's really slowed down since then. The other harm from that event was that has been a remarkable and noticeable drop in guests' willingness to come on and speak freely on the show. And you may have noticed that if you're a listener, and maybe not. I've worked really, really hard to keep the show relevant and helpful and pressing the envelope, pressing forward on.
Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of a conversation. If you are still hearing my voice, that means you're one of the MVPs, one of the diehards, one of the real ones, as the kids say. So if you are willing on the way out to check out a few different ways that you can help me continue to make this show high quality. One, use the promo code. That's the biggest one. At Sight Reading Factory, at mymusicfolders.com, at mychoirropes.com, at graphitepublishing.com, and endeavormusicpublishing.com. All of those take the Choralosophy checkout code. And of course, now the newest one is 3-Minute Theory. You can get a 15% discount when you enter Choralosophy at checkout there. And of course, going to Apple Podcasts and leaving a positive review is very helpful there, and sharing the episodes to your colleagues in real life and on social media. All of those things are incredibly helpful and allow me to continue to create this resource for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.